So that means that, notice what happened here is they made all the intervals based on the major and then made the minors flattened of it one step down. But that doesn't necessarily mean that that interval is in the main minor, and the major exception is this minor, which is the one note away minor second is still in the main minor, which is the minor scale or Aeolian mode. It's not in the, it is in the Phrygian. It's not in the main minor. It is in the Phrygian. If I started on the Phrygian and went one note up, it's in that one. All right, let's go to the next one. Let's go to the minor third. So once again, the major third was 4 notes away. That means the minor third is going to be 3 notes. Is going to be 3 notes away. So it's going to be a flattened of the majors. Let's show both of them here. So here's the major third, and then there's the minor third. So the minor third is in the main minor in the Aeolian. So if I started from the Ionian here and I went 3 notes up, I'll go 1, 2, 3, lands me in the ocean. That's why they still have to call it a third though, because if I count this way from these 7 notes, if I go up, it's going to be almost to the third, but it doesn't get there. So really from the major scale, it should be something like, from a scale degree, it should be 1, 2, it's like 2.5, right? Because it's not actually the third. It's in between the second and the third. So from the perspective of the major scale, which is what everything is made from, you would think it would be like, you would think it would be the 2.5, scale degree or whatever. But if you look at the minor, it works, because if I was on the Aeolian and I go up 3, it goes 1, 2, 3, then I land on a continent. So this one is a third in the minor scale. But again, that's not always the case. That's not really how they built it, because this one isn't a second in the minor scale. I hope I got the second and third right. So then we have the perfects. Now the perfect is in both the major and the minor. And then we got this really weird one, which is the 6 note away. Now, if you think about a clock face, the 6 is right in the middle. So we went halfway through. The 6 note away is not a distance that is in most of the if I start on any of these continents, I can't generally go 6 notes away without landing in the ocean. The exception is that the Lydian has it, but it's kind of weird because that's an augmented 4th, and then the Locrian has it, and that's going to be a diminished 5th. So typically when you hear 6 note away, they have to use some term. They couldn't use a minor. Why? Because the next one up, the 7 note away, is a perfect 5th. They used a perfect term. They didn't use a major term. Like, okay, what you would expect using their terminology is they wouldn't use perfects, they would use all majors, right? And then you would expect this 6 to be a minor 5th, right? Because it would be in between the 4th and the 5th. We didn't quite get to the 5th. But they wanted to call, I believe this is what happened, right? They wanted to call the perfect 5th because that was such a cool interval. That's what they made, like the perfect of 5th is made out of the 5ths, and all the stacking of the intervals happened. So they want to call that a special interval of the perfect 5th, but then it doesn't really make sense to have a flat perfect, like the minor thing doesn't quite work, right? So that's when you had to introduce the idea of a diminished 5th, which is a diminished is the default term if there's no other term being used, to just say it's 1/2 step backwards. Okay, but again, that's not really the important thing, because I would rather just call it's a 6 note away 5th, or more precisely, it's a 6 note away 4th modal half step, because that's going to be basically the distance term that will help us to determine how far it is away from the node we're measuring from, and distance-wise. The perfect and the D don't really help me that much, right? They're not really that useful. All right, so then if I go to the minor 8 note away, this is a minor 6. Why? Because the major is here. So the major 6, if I go scale degree 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 is here. So if I go and that's 9 notes up. But if I go 8 notes up, I'm going to be in between. So again, you would think they would call it a major 5.5 scale degree, because it's in between. But no, they're just going to say if it's not in doesn't land you on a continent, if it lands you in the ocean, we're just going to call that a half step back. We're still going to call it a sixth, comparing it kind of like to the major scale, but we're going to flatten it and say it's a half step back. It's going to land you in the ocean, right? So that's going to be a minor sixth. Now, if I go 8 steps up from the Aeolian, then we don't land in the ocean. So that does what you would expect. If I'm on the Aeolian, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lands me on an F. The F is the Lydian, so we're still good. But if I'm on the Ionian, I go up 8. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 lands me in the ocean, right? And then we've got the minor 7. So the minor 7, the major 7 is an 11 note away major 7. So therefore, if I went scale degree up to the 7, it would be here. You would think scale degree would be down. If it's 10 notes away, it would be a 6.5 scale degree. But they don't want to do a 6.5. They just want to say it doesn't land you on a continent here. Therefore, we're going to say it's flattened. That's what the minor means. It's back a half step. It's going to land you in between if you're starting from the Ionian. And that happens to work, however, if you start from the Aeolian, the main minor. So if I'm here and I go up 10, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10 lands me on the G or Mixolydian, so that lands me on a continent. So from a practical standpoint, learning these intervals, you can say if it's a major or if it's a perfect, it's going to be in the major scale. And if it's not in the major scale, they're typically going to call that a minor, which is going to be flattened, bringing it back 1. That works for all of the minors except the minor second, which is still in the which is not in the Aeolian or the minor scale. Still, the minor scale still has a major second. So that kind of is useful, but again, it doesn't really work when you extend it to the other modes, because you might learn that if you're in the context of the major scale, the 1, 4, 5 are the major chords, which are also the major modes. The 2, 3, and 6 are the minor chords and the minor modes if you build a chord off it. The 7 is the Locrian, which is a minor and a flat fifth, basically. So this idea of the minors being in the minor mode and the majors being in the major isn't all that helpful, because it's not going to follow all the way through to the other 2 minor modes and major modes. Meaning, the fact that something is in the major scale doesn't necessarily tell you if it's in the other major modes, which is the 4 and the 5, the Lydian and the Mixolydian. The fact that something says minor in it doesn't necessarily tell you that it's in the minor scales. It might not be in the Dorian, the Phrygian, and the Aeolian. It's not really helping you, and it kind of throws us off into thinking without looking at distances. The distance is the thing that's important, right? So again, you can eliminate this middle term altogether if you add the first term, meaning give me the distance and the scale degree. If I know the distance and the scale degree, that's the thing that should be telling me the flavor. That's the thing that should be telling me which of these nodes I can start from and whether or not I'm going to land in the ocean or not. And so I would replace this center term with something useful that's not confusing, which would be the node. And start from the node you're on. This middle term should be saying this is the distance in notes, and the distance in modal half steps would be preferable instead of scale degrees from the location that we're on, of which there are 7 in any collection of notes in Western music, standard collection, and there's another 5 that we could start on but are not in the key. That's fine. We could start from those notes and measure from there as well. But that would be the more logical way to kind of think of the system. So bottom line, memorize. We have to memorize the system as it is, and then we can realize that then we can add the distance in notes so that we can say them in our head with the actual note distance, which is the most important thing, and be able to know in our mind that that second number represents a measurement term which is always too high by 1 if you were actually going to count from the node, whatever node that you are on in the collection of notes. And that way you can still use these terms but not let it mess you up into forcing you out of the best way to optimize the visualization of the fretboard. Not force you to rename the continents, but think about these as proper distance terms, measuring in two fundamental fashions, by note distance and by modal half steps, which are off by one when you think about the scale degree.